Eleanor Vance died on a Tuesday, leaving behind more than just a house and a will. Hidden inside a locked mahogany cabinet was something far more valuable and dangerous. 40 years of family secrets, meticulously documented, categorized, and weaponized. Her son Aidan would have 7 days to expose them all, one by one, or lose everything. This is the story of how one mother used her death to force an entire family to finally tell the truth. Before we get into this absolutely wild story, hit that subscribe button right now. You'll want to follow for more unbelievable true stories like this one. Now let's get into it. The Vance family gathered at the old estate for Eleanor's funeral, and the atmosphere was exactly what anyone would expect from a woman who spent her entire life perfecting the art of silence. There were no dramatic displays of grief, no emotional breakdowns. Just polite nods, stiff handshakes, and carefully maintained composure. Aidan Vance stood in his expensive suit, accepting condolences he didn't really want, while his sister Martha circled the property with the keen eye of someone already mentally redecorating. The siblings had never been close. Aidan had built a successful career as an architect, designing buildings with the same precision and emotional distance his mother had used to run her household. Martha had become a homemaker obsessed with appearances, maintaining a perfect facade that would have made Eleanor proud. Neither of them expected what came next. At the lawyer's office, Martha sat forward in her chair, ready to hear about her inheritance. The house was substantial, the estate valuable. She had already planned what she would do with it. Aidan just wanted the whole thing over with. Then the lawyer read the terms. The codicil to Eleanor's will contain one requirement. Aidan had to expose one documented family secret every single day for 7 consecutive days. Each secret had to be disclosed to a relevant, living family member. That person had to acknowledge the truth. If Aidan failed even once, if anyone refused to acknowledge what they heard, the entire estate would go to a charity Martha absolutely despised. The lawyer handed Aidan a small brass key. That night, alone in the suffocating quiet of the Vance home, Aidan approached the cabinet. The wood was beautiful, antique, the kind of piece that belonged in a museum. When the lock finally clicked open, the contents made his stomach drop. This wasn't just a messy collection of old papers. Inside were dozens of leather-bound folders, each one labeled with typewritten tags. The documents were organized by date, by subject, by family member. Decades of secrets, sorted with the same meticulous care Eleanor had applied to everything in her life. Eleanor hadn't just been keeping secrets. She had been curating them, building an archive of every lie, every deception, every uncomfortable truth the family had swept under the rug for 40 years. Then Aidan found the journal. Inside Eleanor's elegant handwriting, there was a list. 7 entries, each one assigned to a specific day and a specific person. This wasn't random. His mother hadn't just left an archive. She had left a script, a precisely choreographed plan to detonate the family's carefully constructed facades one secret at a time. Day 1 was Martha. The folder was thick, and its label made Aidan's hands shake. The summer of 1992, Martha's missing tuition. The next morning, Aidan showed up at Martha's pristine dining room with the folder in hand. Martha thought this was about the estate dispute. She was ready for an argument about money and property rights. She wasn't prepared for the truth. "Remember when you lost your college scholarship?" Aidan asked. The summer of 1992? Martha's face changed instantly. "Don't bring that up." But Aidan had already opened the folder. Bank statements, correspondence, a deed. Martha hadn't lost her scholarship at all. She had withdrawn the entire amount, $12,000 in 1992 money, and used it as a down payment on her first house. A house she didn't actually purchase until 5 years later. She had lied to everyone. To their father, to her friends, to the entire family. She played the victim, the girl whose dreams were stolen by bureaucratic error. And Eleanor had known the whole time. The archive showed that Eleanor had quietly paid Martha's tuition herself, never confronting her daughter, never exposing the lie. She just let Martha maintain the fiction of being a victim while secretly covering the debt. "She kept the secret from you, Martha," Aidan explained, his voice hollow. "The secret that she knew you were a liar." Martha sat frozen. A single tear rolled down her cheek. The room was silent except for the ticking of the antique clock on the wall. Finally, she whispered the word Aidan needed to hear. "Acknowledged. One disclosure complete." The contract was fulfilled for day one. But the family bond had been shredded. Aiden realized this wasn't about inheritance at all. Eleanor was using her death to accomplish the one thing she had never managed in life, forcing her family into honest communication, whether they wanted it or not. Day two involved a cousin and a decades-old financial deception related to a family business. The revelation was ugly, the acknowledgement bitter, but it was done. Day three changed everything. Aunt Helen lived in an assisted living home, a gentle woman in her 80s who had always been the warmest member of the fractured Vance clan. The secret assigned to her seemed cruel at first. For 40 years, Helen had believed that her brother, Aiden and Martha's uncle, had tried to cheat her out of land during an estate sale in 1978. A surveyor's report showed she was getting less property than she deserved, and she had reluctantly accepted the deal because she desperately needed the money. The betrayal had quietly poisoned their relationship for decades. The archive revealed the truth. The survey wasn't wrong initially. The night before the final measurements, Eleanor had gone to the property with a shovel and moved the fence posts, deliberately shifting the boundary markers so that Helen would get more land and more money than she was entitled to. Eleanor had sabotaged the survey to help her sister-in-law, then let Helen believe for 40 years that her brother had tried to cheat her. Aiden sat across from Aunt Helen, expecting anger or confusion. Instead, after a long silence, she smiled. "I always wondered," Helen said softly, "how I got that extra money. Your mother tried, didn't she?" In her own strange way, she tried to help. Helen's acknowledgement was gentle, even grateful. It was the first time all week someone had received a secret with grace instead of devastation. The revelation hit Aiden hard. Not all secrets were poison. Some were just love delivered in the most awkward, controlling way possible. By the way, what would you do if you discovered your parent had been keeping files on every family secret for decades? Would you expose them or burn the whole archive? Drop your answer in the comments. Days 4 and 5 brought more revelations. A hidden affair from the 1980s. A forged signature on a legal document. Financial help given secretly and lies told to cover it up. Each disclosure chipped away at the family's carefully constructed mythology. Aiden watched as relatives reacted with shock, anger, relief, and sometimes unexpected understanding. Some acknowledgement came easily. Others were dragged out through tears and shouting. The archive wasn't just exposing lies. It was revealing the complicated truth that Eleanor had spent decades managing everyone's pain, often by creating elaborate deceptions that she believed were acts of protection. She had been the family's unofficial keeper of secrets, absorbing everyone's shame and guilt, documenting it all in her meticulous files. By day 5, Aiden was exhausted. The emotional weight of serving as his mother's posthumous truth-teller was crushing. He had 2 days left. Day 6 was going to be the hardest yet. George, Martha's husband, was a good man. Quiet, hardworking, devoted to his family. For 20 years, he had carried a specific shame that had shaped his entire adult life. In 2005, George had been driving home from his small business when his car veered off the road and crashed. The police report stated that a drunk driver had sideswiped him, causing him to lose control. George's business never recovered from the time he spent in the hospital and rehabilitation. He had spent 2 decades believing he was the victim of someone else's recklessness, that his business failure was the result of random, cruel fate. The archive told a different story. George hadn't been hit by another car. He had suffered a minor stroke at the wheel. The medical records were clear, but Eleanor had intervened immediately. She paid the attending physician to file a modified police report. She covered all the hospital bills under the table. She made sure the insurance claim went through smoothly. And she never told anyone the truth. She let George believe he was the victim of a drunk driver rather than face the vulnerability and fear of his own medical condition. She protected him from the truth because she thought Martha couldn't handle the reality of her husband's health scare. Aiden called George and explained everything, his voice steady but hollow. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "She let me believe." George's voice cracked. "She let me believe it wasn't my fault, but also that I was helpless, that I had no control." The shame George had carried wasn't even real. It had been manufactured by his own mother-in-law in a misguided attempt at protection. His guilt had been misdirected for 20 years. Finally, George whispered, acknowledged. Aiden hung up and sat in the dark parlor, surrounded by the archive. One day left. The last folder had Aiden's name on it. He had been dreading this moment all week, wondering what childhood embarrassment or professional failure his mother had documented. He opened the folder expecting humiliation. Instead, there was only a letter, written on Eleanor's cream-colored stationery in her perfect handwriting. The letter contained one sentence that made Aiden's carefully constructed world collapse. Your secret is the one you never told anyone, including yourself for a long time. You never liked architecture. You pursued it because you thought it was the only thing anyone would ever respect. Aiden sat in his expensive suit, in the house that represented everything his mother had valued, and felt the truth of those words sink in like a stone. He had spent 20 years designing buildings, climbing the professional ladder, earning respect and money and status. And he had hated every single day of it. He became an architect because it seemed like the only career path his mother would approve of, the only profession that matched the precision and control she valued. He had built his entire adult life around pleasing a woman who never actually asked him what he wanted. The silence wasn't just in the house. It was inside him. The letter concluded with instructions. Collect the deed from the safe deposit box and deliver it to Martha, fulfilling the contract. Or break the silence for himself. That evening, Aiden sat across from Martha and George one final time. Martha looked exhausted, beaten down by a week of revelations, but ready to finally claim her inheritance and move forward. Aiden slid an envelope across the table. Martha reached for it, assuming it was the deed. It wasn't. It was Eleanor's letter. Martha read it slowly, confusion spreading across her face. Then Aiden spoke. The letter is right. Everything in there is true. The secret is that for 20 years, the career, the life, everything that looked successful from the outside has been a lie. Architecture was never the dream. It was just what seemed acceptable. He took a breath. The plan now is to leave the firm, to teach art history, to actually do something that feels real. Martha stared at her brother like she was seeing him for the first time in decades. Then, unexpectedly, she smiled. A small, genuine expression that broke through all the tension and pain of the previous week. Acknowledged, she said softly. Aiden reached into his jacket and pulled out the actual deed to the house. He placed it in front of Martha. The contract was complete. All 7 secrets exposed. All 7 acknowledged. The inheritance Eleanor left behind wasn't the house or the money or the antique furniture. It wasn't even the archive itself. It was the ability to speak. Eleanor Vance had lived her entire life in calculated silence, managing everyone's pain through control and secrets and carefully orchestrated deceptions. She couldn't break that pattern while she was alive. So she used her death to force her entire family to do what she never could, tell the truth. 7 days of mandated honesty to shatter 40 years of inherited silence. The revelations were painful. Some relationships were damaged, maybe permanently. But in the wreckage, something unexpected emerged. For the first time in decades, the Vance family had something real. Conversations without scripts. Relationships without facades. Martha kept the house. Aiden left his architecture firm within a month and took a teaching position at a small college, something that would have seemed impossible just weeks earlier. Aunt Helen started talking to family members she had avoided for years. George began processing his medical history with a therapist, finally addressing the vulnerability he had been running from. The archive itself? Aiden and Martha went through it together over several months, deciding what needed to be addressed and what could finally be laid to rest. Some secrets they shared with other family members. Others they quietly destroyed. Eleanor's final act was as controlling and manipulative as everything else she had done in life. But it was also, in its own twisted way, an act of love. She knew her family was drowning in silence, and she used the only tool she had left to force them to the surface. The Vance family doesn't need the silence anymore. The house still stands on its overgrown drive, but it feels different now. Less like a museum of control and more like a place where real people with real flaws actually lived. Eleanor Vance died on a Tuesday, and the silence finally ended. Just not the way anyone expected. If this story got to you, smash that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And seriously, drop a comment about what you would have done in Aiden's position. Would you have gone through with it? Subscribe for more incredible true stories. Thanks for watching.